You ought to be really prepared for Zechariah, because we're looking at the same time frame, just a little bit longer. We were talking about months, and sometimes before Haggai finishes, Zechariah comes within weeks of the prophecies. They're together in our Old Testaments, where we can kind of go back and forth and compare the two. So we don't do a lot of detailed work about in the introduction, but as the time that we have allotted, I would like to cover some of this introductory material that we have. And you'll notice that this prophecy is quite a bit longer. It's 14 chapters, so there are a lot of questions we'll go through. But when we think about Zechariah, we're thinking about whom Jehovah remembers. You know, Haggai was just that which is a festive or a festival. And it's, well, you know, I don't know how that applies to his work as a prophet. But the idea of whom Jehovah remembers, that's a pretty good name to have. God's remembering him and appreciating the work that he does. But one of the things we see that he was a priest. And you'll notice that in Nehemiah, here's the history between Babylonian captivity and coming back. And in Nehemiah, what are they rebuilding? Are they rebuilding the temple? Or what are they building with Nehemiah? What are they building? Rebuilding the walls. Isn't that right? They had a mind to work. Well, a mind to work to build the temple? No, it's the walls. And so when we see Nehemiah, we're looking at the leadership, just like we're seeing it in the prophet books themselves. But in Nehemiah, the 12th chapter and verse 4, we read this. Ido. Now verse 1 says, these are the priests and the Levites that went up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, Jeshua, and so forth. And so you have one of them his name is Iddo. I'll get it right in a minute. Iddo. He's the son of Iddo. Notice in verse 16, of Iddo, Zechariah. What's that the context of? These are the priests, heads of fathers. In the days of Joachim were priests, heads of fathers' houses. And he was the head of his father Iddo. He was the head of that house. They are priests. Now, how does Zechariah, how does he identify himself in his book? What does verse 1 say? In the 8th month, so we've been looking in the 2nd year of the 6th month, the 7th month, and then the 9th month. Well, in that same year, in the 8th month, here comes along, overlapping some. They're both working together to encourage the people. In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, that's Darius the first, not Darius the Mede, it's Darius the first, who, about 522, he begins to reign until the 480s. But he says, Zechariah, he's the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, well, who's this, who's this son of? Where's Berechiah fit in? And one of the points I want to make, the other one, when you find something, well, he's not childless, then the Bible is what? The Bible's the blame. It's wrong. So we got errors in the Bible. He wasn't childless. In fact, it led up to the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Can you imagine that? Boy, we just strengthen the atheists who will never read for themselves, never study for themselves. Many of them won't. That we see that taking place. Well, here we have a sense that you talk about the son of Iddo, but why isn't it Berechiah? And my explanation here is that Berechiah had died shortly after return from Babylonian exile, and Zechariah indeed was the the next in line that we see. And so we see in Ezra, the 5th chapter, and chapter 5 and verse 1. I know we're doing a lot of moving around here, but I think it's important to see that in the Scripture themselves if we're going to make a judgment upon Scripture. Now the prophets Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Iddo. Didn't say Berechiah here, it said Iddo. He's prophesying. He's the son of Iddo. And then we see in chapter 6 and verse 14, and the elders of the Jews builded and prospered through the building and through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And the explanation that I found that I think is very plausible is that at this time the father had died early, and so that was between them, or this Iddo, and Berechiah had died, and Zechariah just comes in on the line that he's next and be the son of Iddo. A lot of times son of something could be a grandfather, literally. It could be many more descendants than that in Scripture. So we learned that by studying the Scriptures as well. So it's not a contradiction, but it may be an explanation why someplace Zechariah is speaking of that lineage, and then the others are not. Could be very shortly after they came back, he passed away. And so that just bridged the gap some more between Iddo and Zechariah. He prophesied with Haggai. You can see those two books together. Any questions on what we do know about him and that sort of thing? All right. Let's look at the dates for just a moment. That's what he did. Date of the book. Remember, Darius the first came in 522, so you got him coming into power in the second year. This when the prophecy hit, 520. That's what we look at. And so there's the time frame, maybe 520 to 518 BC during that time, but 520 will be a pretty good place to start to get in your mind those events that are taking place. Now, as we saw in Haggai, we saw that there were prophecies that were dated, and we could kind of pick up the idea of why they were dated when they were, why the type of prophecy was given on the heels of another. We could kind of read between the lines. Well, they were discouraged, maybe because of this, maybe because of that. And we pick up with that because he needed a message. He wasn't given one. And it just shows you a man is not inspired all the time, and that inspiration comes and goes because it's presenting a definite message. Under that message, he is inspired of God. Those are very words of God. But it wasn't staying on him all the time. It came. We'll see in Zechariah, it comes in visions, which is going to be a different thing. He's going to express in your vision. You're going to have to interpret what the vision meant. But that was just another way, as Haggai is in narrative form with direct prose, and you got Zechariah in symbolic form with visions. What does it mean? Both of them were being used by God to get the people back to work. And it worked. They were able to finish it in 4 years when they finally got back starting. So we see these particular prophecies dated as well. So we pick up with the first one. It's the 8th month in the second year of Darius. So I'm in that same time frame as Haggai in this year, but now I'm coming 2 months later, approximately. And then we go into the 11th month in the second year of Darius. We see that in verse 7. Upon the 4th and 20th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shebat, in the second year of Darius, the word of Jehovah, it came unto Zechariah the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo. So maybe Berechiah was still alive at this point. But soon after that would take place. But Zechariah gives that lineage in detail there. And then we will skip to the 4th year. So what we'll see in these chapters, chapter 1 through 7, chapter 1 and verse 7 through chapter 6, they're going to be in a time frame But then we're going to pick up in chapter 7 and verse 1, he dates it again. So those chapters 1 through 6, we're going to see some visions. And it's all connected with one message, one prophecy that he's given. And then we pick up, it came to pass in the 4th year of King Darius, that the word of Jehovah came to Zechariah on the 4th day of the month, even in Shivlev. So there's that one. And then we'll pick up the next 2 burdens that are not dated in chapters 9 through 11. And what we'll see in a few moments is that the nature of these prophecies were being very specific of the future glory. And the implication is he doesn't date them. The implication is what has happened, this future glory that Haggai's been talking about, kingdoms melting and chariots being taken away, the armies going. We haven't seen that yet with the glory connected with this temple. And all of a sudden, you'll have chapters 9 through 11, and then also chapters 12 through 14 to deal with what is the nature of that universal reign of glory. And I think he's pointing to Jesus Christ. I think we'll establish some of that if we have time this morning. So you have some dated material, just like Haggai did. You got 2 that are not dated that come in their sections. So there's the sections we're looking at. All right. Any questions on that? Just to get an idea, look at the 8-9 visions in your outline. The rider and horseman among the myrtle trees. What does that mean? Well, I got my point here. You see if that's right or not. The 4 horns and the 4 smiths. Are they hostile nations? What does horn represent a lot? Power. That would be kingdoms. Hostile nations. That would make sense. The man with the measuring line. Multitude again in Zion. All the people coming to Zion, and all of a sudden, the people may be saying, where are the people? Where are all the Gentile nations you talk about coming? And he had to do the other chapters. Page 2, the trial and acquittal of the high priest Joshua, the cleansing of the sins of the people. Did we not see that in Haggai, where Joshua the priest is being honored, being cleansed, and so forth? Zechariah does the same thing. 5, the golden lampstand with 2 olive trees. Who are the 2 olive trees? I'm going to ask you to be very specific about that. 6, the flying roll. Curse upon sinners and their houses. The flying roll. That's what I'm saying it is by the context. The woman in the ephah. Wickedness transported out of the land. Sorry, women. That one, the woman is evil. Question number 8. The 4 chariots and horses of various colors. Does that remind you of the book of Revelation? Written in apocalyptic literature, that's what we're about to experience. But it wasn't new when you see in Revelation. That had been a way of communicating from the Jews' standpoint for a long time. So what does that represent? God's judgments from the hostile nations are accomplished. And then chapter 6, 9 through 15, the symbolic crowning of the high priest, and so forth, and we'll get into those. So we've got some of those visions taking up these 6 chapters, and then we'll get into chapter 7. So look at the characterization of the book. There's been, and we just state this, there's 70 years of exile. So the deportation came in 3 realms, 3 times. Beginning in 606 BC. Thank you. You have the elite, Daniel, the kings, and they'll be taken off into captivity. Finally, in 536, that's when they'll be able to come back under Cyrus. So there's 70 years of exile. From 586, and I put 516 because that's when the temple was completed, but really it would be 520, 586 to 520 with no temple. Let's give them credit, they're building that, but they still had to wait till then to have their temple back. So that's why the 516 is there. That had plagued God's people. The returning Jews needed to complete the rebuilding of the temple. We see that in Zechariah 1:12, Jeremiah 25, Jeremiah 29. Every one of those passages speak about you'll be in captivity for 70 years. Now, in coming back, the 70 years have been completed. What is their work to do? Build the temple. Nehemiah will come, rebuild the walls. You have a city. You have a temple where God's presence is. And they had, and tell me the message of Haggai, why is Haggai getting after him? It's not time to build the temple, but what's it time for? My house. I'll build my house. And I will decorate it. And then God's house, just foundation. That's all it was. And that was not going to be allowed by God. So we see here what they needed to do. The foundation but no structure, Zechariah will deal with that in chapter 1 in verse 16 to get an idea of what will be seen here. Therefore, thus said Jehovah, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, said Jehovah of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth over Jerusalem. Measuring it, telling us what's going to be in it, how is it going to be structured, what's it going to be made of, measuring line, symbolic literature. We're going to have to get our minds set up on that. And what does that mean? And the context will help us to see that. But they were to do that. And they needed to understand encouragement and holiness. They needed to understand holiness. That's why Joshua's sins had to be cleansed. That's why the people were not prospering, because they weren't living holy lives. That's why they went into captivity. But all those things were there. So those two things, encouragement and holiness, is Zechariah's message. And then what we see in chapters 1 through verse 6 will be communication through visions that we'll see take place. Now, here's the point, and our time is short, so I'll just hit these. There's a more definite emphasis upon what that future glory of the temple, the throne in Judah, when you look at what the Bible talks about, heavenly Jerusalem, but how these prophecies were fulfilled. And you and I can identify with this as we look back. The humble king comes to Jerusalem. Who prophesies about that? Zechariah does. When does he do that? In chapters 9, when we're going to see what is the future glory of the temple, God's people, Jerusalem. What's it pointing to? Well, it's when your king rides humbly upon the foal of a donkey. Isn't it interesting that every one of the Gospels mentions this? Is that an important event in the life of Jesus? Every one of the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, but also John, will speak about him from a different viewpoint, will speak about his entry into Jerusalem. How significant that was. It was fulfilling the prophecies that were before them. Secondly, the rejected shepherd. He sold for a price of a wounded slave in the context of Zechariah. That's chapter 11, 9 through 11, future glory. I'm getting very specific now. It's not, it'll be like Zerubbabel was a signet ring. No, it'll be like your humble king comes to Jerusalem. What's he coming to do? To die? He's a rejected shepherd. And we think of 30 pieces of silver. Why that price? It is the price of a wounded slave. Matthew 27 speaks about that's what Judas betrayed him for. Yes, sir, David. Yeah, that's right. And he wounded one at that. So it wasn't worth much, was it? And then the final one, grace following the piercing of God's Son. They'll look upon whom they pierced. John 19:37. And that was Jesus Christ. And when they drove the spear into his side, had he already died? He didn't die of a spear wound. That was a sign he's dead. They'll look upon whom they pierced. He's already dead. And out flowed from his body the water and the blood, so forth. But he was already dead at that time. It is finished. I've died. And of course, he'll be raised. So we're in store for things of prophecies that will strengthen us as we read through our New Testaments and as we think about it. But Zechariah says, this is your future glory. This is the future glory for God's people. You think they understood it? I doubt it. But just like Zerubbabel is a signet ring, we're able to to fathom that, and I think that's wonderful that we're blessed that way. Any questions on the introduction? We'll start with chapter 1 and our questions next time, Lord willing. Okay, thank you.